ke wena fela o fumanang bohlale kelello le kutlwisiso rona bahlanka ba hao ba fokolang re phutheile mona hammoho ka lebitso la hao mme re kopa ka boikokobetso hore o re tshollele bohlale bo tswang hodimo o re bontsha le ho re tsamaisa ho tsohle tseo re tlang ho di etsa o re thuse re tsamaye ka tshabo pela sefahleho sa hao re lahlele hole le rona dithato tsa dipelo tsa rona boikgohomoso le boitshepi tsohle tseo re tla di phetha mona e be tse totisang lebitso la hao le halalelang e be tshebetso ya borapedi ba nnete le toka e be poloko le hlompho le thabo ho motlotlei le tsie wa boraro le tshireletso ho tonakgolo ya rona matona baetapele ba mekga ya bohanyetsi le ditho tsohle tse kgabane tse phuthehileng mona e be nala lefatsheng le kgotso mme meferefere e fele ka hohle dipelo tsa bohle di ke di kopane mme lerato la nnete la bokreste la ho rata bana ba bo rona le tiye ka Jesu Kriste morena le mokhodisi wa rona amen.
Amen.
Lo khutlisi e tsi ka tsela ka bo na matha
Section 12, subsection 2 of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly may convene joint sittings of the Houses under the following circumstances. Number 1, the delivery of policy statements by the Prime Minister. Number 2, presentation of the budget speech. And number 3, addresses by visiting heads of states, governments, and other dignitaries. Today is one such day in which the two houses will be together to listen to the financial policy statement by the Honorable Minister of Finance and Development Planning. May I call upon the Right Honorable Speaker to read to you the temporary standing orders that will guide the proceedings of today.
Temporary standing orders for joint sittings of the Houses of Parliament, pursuant to the Senate Standing Order number 100, 1 in brackets, B in brackets, and the National Assembly Standing Order number 110, 1 in brackets, B in brackets. Notice to members. The clerks shall issue notices to members specifying the subject matter, date, time, and venue for the joint sitting. Presiding in joint sittings. First, the joint sitting of the House of Parliament, the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly shall be co-chairs. Second, if one of the presiding officers is not present, the Vice President or the Deputy Speaker, as the case may be, may co-chair. Procedure at joint sittings. At any joint sitting, the procedure of any of the houses shall apply, with such variations as the co-chairpersons may consider necessary and appropriate. Record of proceedings of joint sittings. The clerks shall cause to be prepared a full record of proceedings of a joint sitting, and shall, as soon as practicable, publish it in such form and manner as the presiding officers may, from time to time, jointly direct. Last, adjournment. Joint sittings of the two houses of Parliament will adjourn similarly. The government for all being that thing here, the government substitute in a community that are going to see the woman. The ballet now is to in a may have it at the who memo community one.
Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Item 2, motion number 242, financial policy.
Honorable Minister, the floor is yours on that. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, allow me to pay my respects to His Majesty the President and Head of State, the Right Honorable the Prime Minister and Head of Government, His Lordship, Chief Justice, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the House, my colleagues, Honorable Ministers of His Majesty's Government, His Lordship, President of the Court of Appeal, Honorable Members of the Council of State, Honorable Leader of Opposition, Honorable Judges of the High Court and Court of Appeal, Honorable Deputy President of Senate, Honorable Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Members of both Houses of Parliament, Their Excellencies, Heads of Diplomatic Mission and international organizations, distinguished members of the media, Sotuba Hesu, Kahari, Dandekonaha, Piari, Dumetisa. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, I'm pleased to present the budget estimates.
Next time you mention those titles, you will say Right Honorable Speaker.
May I beg your guidance, Right Honorable Speaker?
Oh, and the little of the Right Honorable Speaker. That's the same. We don't make it easy. But pizza. Me when I chair one queer assist. Again, and Tabadela is to provide it 1 hour, but don't pay. Who can you impress nothing? You know, some pizza. In Bahamas, listen. I have an honorable president and right honorable.
Right Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, I am pleased to present the budget estimates for the 2026-27 fiscal year, guided by the theme
accelerating economic transformation, building resilience. In recent years, our efforts have been directed towards restoring macro-fiscal stability, strengthening governance, and laying foundations for inclusive, broad-based, and sustainable job-creating growth. These efforts, were not only deliberate and necessary, but informed by deep reflections of the underpinnings of our journey for development since time immemorial, as well as our beliefs and practices that have become norms and traditions. Yet they collide with the basic principles of transformative and progressive economic policy. This efforts have, however, helped us to stabilize our fiscal position, expand social protection, invest in infrastructure, and build resilience in the face of external shocks. However, stabilization is hardly a sufficient condition for prosperity. Foundations alone do not create opportunity. A nation does not transform by simply preserving what exists. It transforms by building what does not yet exist. We now enter a new phase in our journey to transform our economy. A phase that needs clarity, resolve, and demands acceleration, structural reforms, and productive expansion. But a phase that puts the needs and ambitions of Basutu ahead of those of individuals. The time has come for us to move decisively from recovery to flight, from dependence to diversification, and from constraint to opportunity. This budget estimates, therefore, represents more than an annual financial plan. They are a strategic instrument to reshape the structure of the economy and to redefine ourselves. It is a commitment to unlock the productive capacity of our people, to empower enterprise, and position Lesotho as a competitive participant in the regional and global markets. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the argument for transformation has never been more compelling. The global economic landscape has become bullish and hostile. Our economy continues to face structural constraints that limit growth and job creation. Youth unemployment remains unacceptably high. Our revenue base remains vulnerable to external volatility and shocks, and global economic conditions marked by geopolitical tensions, technological disruption, and climate pressures demand that we strengthen our economic resilience with urgency and foresight. Yet, within these challenges lie incredible opportunities. Advancements in technology, tapping into an expansion of regional markets, growing demand for sustainable production, and our own natural and human resources present pathways and opportunities to a more dynamic and diversified economy. To seize these opportunities, we must empower the primary engine of sustainable growth, which is the private sector. Governments must create a conducive environment, provide infrastructure, and ensure the stability within which enterprise can thrive. On the other hand, private sector must be willing to take risks. Investment must expand, innovation and creativity must be accelerated. Jobs must be created not by temporary stimuli, but by sustainable productive activity. Once again, this is a defining moment in our nation's development path. The decisions we take today will shape the trajectory of our economy for years to come. This budget, therefore, sets out a clear and deliberate course of action to transform Lesotho into a more productive, competitive, and resilient economy, driven by private sector initiative and supported by a capable and enabling state. As we embark on this path and journey, we do so with determination, conviction, and with confidence in the ingenuity and resilience of us as a people. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, allow me to set the scene by giving a brief on recent economic developments, challenges and risks, as well as opportunities, and thereby shed light on the economic environment underpinning the budget estimates for 2026-27 that I will later put before you. I now turn to the environment, starting with the global and regional macroeconomic developments. Global growth remains relatively resilient, projected at 3.3% in 2026 and 3.2% in 2027, supported by productivity gains, technological investments, and the transformative impact of artificial intelligence and technology. However, this resilience marks tightening financial conditions, elevated interest rates, rising public debt, climate-related shocks, and a shift towards more inward-looking policy priorities. These dynamics have reduced the availability of concessional finance and reshaped global trade relations, making growth more uneven and less predictable. Zeroing in on regions, growth in advanced economies is expected to remain stable at 1.8% in 2026 and 1.7% in 2027. The United States economy is forecast to expand by 2.4% in 2026, slowing to 2% in 2027, supported by favorable fiscal policies, easing interest rates, and corporate tax incentives. While this performance reflects resilience, it has not translated into improved outcomes for smaller trade-dependent economies facing higher trade barriers. Across emerging markets and developing economies, Growth is projected to be 4.2% in 2026, down from 4.4% in 2025, reflecting weaker capital inflows, heightened trade uncertainty, and increasing exposure to protectionist measures. China's growth is expected to moderate from 5% in 2025 to 4.5% in 2026 and 4% by 2027, while India's growth, after reaching 7.3% in 2025, is projected to stabilize at 6.4% in both 2026 and 2027. Coming down to Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa continues to show resilience, but subdued growth, projected at 4.6% in both 2026 and 2027, supported by macroeconomic stabilization and reforms. However, tighter external financing conditions, less secure trade preferences, and climate disruptions continue to weigh heavily on small operating economies. South Africa, Lesotho's principal economic anchor, is projected to grow by approximately 1.4% in 2026, supported by improved energy availability and stabilizing macroeconomic conditions. This recovery supports relatively stable SACU revenues and remittance flows, but it remains stabilizing rather than transformative and does not fundamentally alter the region's low growth trajectory. Coming now to the outlook. Looking ahead, global growth is projected to remain broadly steady at around 3.25% over the medium term, while global inflation is expected to decline further towards 3 to 4% range. However, risks remain tilted to the downside. This includes renewed trade tensions, geopolitical shocks that could disrupt supply chains and commodity prices, and a potential reassessment of technology-driven productivity expectations that could weaken investment and trigger financial market corrections. Elevated public debt levels in several or a number of countries may also exert upward pressure on long-term interest rates, further tightening global financing conditions. To put things in perspective, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, members, we are faced with a global economy that is undergoing a fundamental transformation and transition. A transition that is complex and painful to say the least, and characterized by a movement from an orderly, rules-based multilateral trading system. While global growth remains relatively resilient, the benefits of this growth are unevenly distributed. For small, open, and trade-dependent economies like ours, the operating environment has become significantly hostile and complex. The multilateral trading system that once favored economies such as ours is giving way to a more fragmented, protectionist, and competitive global order. highly competitive global order, I must say. Heightened trade tensions, tariff wars, and the strategic reshoring of supply chains are redefining global commerce. These shifts have direct and severe implications for us as Lesotho. And now looking into the implications for Lesotho, this global and regional shifts have direct consequences. And although growth in major economies remains positive, heightened trade barriers and uncertainty around trade preference regimes have weakened confidence in vulnerable economies. While government successfully secured a one-year extension of AGOA and a moderation of tariffs around 50%, tariffs remain elevated by historical standards. And global trade tensions continue to weigh heavily on long-term investment planning. Heightened uncertainty in global trade and financial markets underscores the importance of preserving reserve buffers or fiscal buffers, safeguarding external stability, and remaining vigilant to spillovers through trade, sucking revenues, and regional financial conditions. The impact has been much more pronounced in the textile and apparel sector and in the mining sectors, which are historically our largest private sector employers. International buyers are de-risking the supply chains, diverting orders away from smaller economies. Factory and mine closures, job losses, and declining household incomes have followed, posing risks to employment, foreign exchange earnings, skills retention, and social stability. At the same time, external concessional financing has been contracted sharply. The cancellation of the Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact 2 and other supports reflect a structural withdrawal of grant financing rather than a temporary fluctuation, creating funding gaps in health, in water, in agriculture. Having looked into this, I move now to domestic economic development. For our economy, economic growth in 2024-25 registered 4.2%, driven largely by the works of the Lesotho Highland Water Project Phase 2, with construction growing by 6.3%. The textile industry rebounded to 3.2% growth from minus 11% in 2023-24 as firms accelerated order completion amid uncertainties related to AGOA renewal. This momentum was temporary or proved temporary. In 2025-26, growth declined to 1.4% due to external shocks, including tighter trade conditions on exports and a continued decline in global diamond prices. The downturn was most pronounced in textiles and mining, where reduced orders costs, care and maintenance decisions, and cost-containment measures, including workforce reductions, mine life revisions, and targeted royalty relief were implemented to preserve cash flow and sustain operations. Coming to inflation, inflation remains contained, moderating to 4.3% in 2025 and stabilizing at a range of 4.5% to 4.7% over the medium term, supported by easing fuel and food prices, though there are upside risks that persist, and these come from exchange rate volatility and global trade disruptions. Looking ahead, our medium-term projections show the economy growing sluggishly at 1.5% in 2027-28 and 1.6% in 28-29. The improvements in the agricultural sector are expected to be anchored by enhanced breeding practices on livestock, coupled with anticipated favorable weather conditions on crops. Even with this, there is a likelihood of much more moderated improvements as diseases continue to ravage our livestock. In the manufacturing sector, operational factory spaces in Jigwe and Bello are anticipated to benefit the textiles and other manufacturing sectors. These are also aspirations of diversifying into, there are also aspirations of diversifying into regional and other markets. However, the growth anticipated from these initiatives will not offset the deterioration in AGOA-related terms, resulting in worsening of the textile industry growth projections. Once again, we have to be cautious. On the contrary, the mining industry over the medium term continues to be under pressure with the continued global demand and price slumps, oversupply and competition from synthetic diamonds and other factors. Mining fell sharply, with estimates showing marginally around minus 3.5%. Diamond sector pressures are expected to persist until global demand and prices stabilize, potentially limiting near-term growth. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, I turn now to fiscal developments and performance. In 2025-26, total revenue is now estimated at 27.1 billion malut, equivalent to 60% of GDP in terms of performance. Tax revenue amounted to 10.7 billion. I beg your pardon. Income tax revenue revenue amounted to 10.7 billion, which is 24% of GDP, comprising 5.4 billion magnitude from income taxes and 5.3 billion magnitude from taxes on goods and services. Value-added tax continued or contributed 4.3 billion magnitude, while excise revenues stood at 1 billion magnitude. Grants amounted to 1.8 billion magnitude, which is about 4.4% of GDP, while other revenue totaled 5.4 billion magnitude, about 12% of GDP, including property income of 351 million magnitude. SACCO receipts accounted for 20.4% of GDP, remaining a critical pillar of fiscal performance. Coming to expenditures, the current expenditure is expected to total 19.3 billion, which is about 42.7% of GDP, including social benefits of 2.5 billion magnitude and interest payments of 1.1 billion magnitude. Capital expenditure amounted to 6.4 billion magnitude, which is about 14.2% of GDP. We expect that the fiscal year will close with a headline surplus of approximately 3.2% of GDP against an initially approved deficit of 2.5% of GDP. This is on account of two factors. Higher water royalties of 4.7 or 4.8 billion, as well as underperformance or under-execution of the capital budget. So the outcome that we have is cyclical and masks a persistent weakness of under-execution and must be corrected. Coming to the 2026-27 budget outlook and estimates, for 2026-27, the revenue outlook is cautiously optimistic. We are optimistic but cautious. Personal income is projected at 3.5 billion magnitude. This is above the 3.1 billion approved in 2025-26. We project that corporate income tax will be 1.1 billion magnitude. And value-added tax remains the main downside risk, with a projected 4.7 billion below the 5 billion magnitude approved in 2025-26. This is a reflection of subdued consumption. Total expenditure is budgeted at 30.9 billion magnitude, which is about 67.3% of GDP. Of this, the current expenditure amounts to 21.9 billion reflects a decisive shift towards infrastructure investment and accelerated execution. Over the medium term, revenue is projected to stabilize at 67.8% of GDP in 2027-28 and 69% in 2028-29, while expenditure declines to 67.7% from 67.7% while expenditure declines to 67.7%, resulting in fiscal surpluses of 2.9% and 7% of GDP, respectively. The external position has weakened due to declining textile and diamond exports. While the balance of payments remains supported by Lesotho Highlands Water Project Phase 2 capital inflows, the current account deficit is expected to widen in 2026 before improving as construction imports normalize. Foreign reserves are projected to remain adequate at around 6 months of import cover, although sensitive to cycle volatility, to diamond prices, and fiscal execution risks. Coming to debt, the government of Lesotho's total debt stock as at end of January and for fiscal year 25-26 amounted to 22.7 billion maluti, which is 50% of GDP. This is a decline of 667.2 million from 3.4 billion maluti at the end of the fiscal year 24-25. This reflects a 3% reduction in our debt stock, with the debt to GDP ratio falling from 54.3% to 50% of GDP. The composition of public debt also shifted during the period, with the share of domestic or shares of domestic and external debt moving from 15.4% and 84.6% respectively to 16.9% and 83.1% respectively. The external debt portfolio remains mostly concessional at a share of 88.4% currently. This is despite the country graduating from international development assistance, low income to low middle income country status, which presented the country with the hardened higher cost of borrowing from the international financial markets. Our debt risk rating as a country remains unchanged from 2024-25 fiscal year at moderate levels of debt distress with limited space to absorb shocks. Honorable Speaker, this macroeconomic forecast leads to one clear conclusion. I wish I could make it easier. But the conclusion is that the reality that we are facing compels for us to adopt a deliberate shift in policy priorities towards strengthening domestic revenue mobilization. We have to be inward-looking. The financial markets out there are becoming much more stringent. So we have to look inwards towards strengthening domestic revenue mobilization, enforcing discipline and efficient expenditure in government, and restoring credibility in policy execution. For us, building economic resilience is no longer an option. It is now binding, and it is now the central organizing principle guiding government's policy priorities for 2026-27 financial year. Before I turn into policy priorities, allow me, Honorable President and Right Honorable Speaker, to highlight the risks and vulnerabilities posed by the current conditions. Honorable Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker, nitakuwa kasi tu, yeye kama swali kwa ile itakuwa tena toki ndio kaso. Iba tada vya hapo ina yangu. Iba ni kila kitu kwa ndani ndio kaso. Ile ndio ndio auto. Kuna ndio iba tada hapo kana kwa ini itakuwa kwa mbele toki ipo. Kaya kile Maemo au kashabani ndoona tabasai tu ki maemo au na hapo au nafasi kwa nguo wala nafasi upe tu ile hapo ya lemo hapo nafasi ni na boni yake tu na bonyo kuna mzindo kuna ni kita no dijek sana. Dua sana ni kita sana ta teknologi kita pemagangan. Dua sana ni kita ta boleh mobile tu bosa kita. Kalau kita boleh kuat sekolah boleh nah kalau pasti ta buka ibaka dichelibi akujeni na hajoko to usala seleka ntona baba kala matata au banando bakatela bancheba bona tokota ona pipi mita ba yo yo ta ko buke tata ona ko gani ibe chale ke yo ke nse imana machani ise ismaya abugo bafona kina koya kore itako kucha maybe itako be mo ba ona kucha ko be ko umuyena ko ke shele ka ha ho ho ko na ba ti ba ho e lo ke se ke batho
Ya utlwa Moses. Ya utlwa. Ai utlwa ikani. Ai utlwa.
le hlomphehi re lokela jwale ho kopanya mabokobo hore re sebedise dihlodileng tseo re nang le tsona le tsohle tseo Modimo a re fileng tsona hore re bone hore di sebeletsa naha ya habo rona. Re ntse re sebetsa hape le tsona dinaha tseo re nang le setswalle le tsona hore re se ke ra ba tshepe ya tshebedisano. Mohlomphehi, ditaba tsena di re bona. Re lokela jwale ha re ya ditabeng tsa diphapano tsa ditjhelete tsa selemo sena seo re tlo kenang sona. Di itukise hore tjhelete e ka fumanehang e sebediswe ka hloko haholo molemong wa ntshetsopele le ntlafatso ya setjhaba le naha ya rona. Mme re kenye maano tshebetsong a tla etsa hore ho be jwalo e le kannete. Hangata ha lefatsheng ho na le ditaba tsa mofuta o tjena, ho ba le dinaha tse nyenyane jwalo ka rona ke tsona tse utlwang bohloko ho feta tse kgolo. Mme re lokela ho lemoha taba eo, mme re be re sebetse ka matla hore re le naha ya Lesotho mehlodi ena e etsahlang ha e kena re ntse e le naha e nang le boikemelo eo e ka tswang e fete mathata ana mme e be e tswele pele. Taba eo e re tlama hore se senyane seo re nang le sona ebe re tseba hore re boloke hobane ha re tsebe se tlang ka morao. Ha re tsebe se tlang seo re tla kopana le tsona ka pele. Mme taba eo re etse jwalo re shebile hore setjhaba le sona se ya pele, haholoholo setjhaba se tlase se hlokang haholo taba e re bitsang social protection. Mohlomphehi, ke rata hore jwale ke fetele moo ke reng ke bue ka mona di-columns tseo re di bonang di le teng, ke difeng tseo re di aheletseng ka hare ho diphapano tsena tseo re nang le tsona. Ke tla fetola leleme lwane Mohlomphehi hape ke re ke fetele this environmentalities for 2026-27. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the government remains committed to maintaining a sustainable fiscal path. Empa ke hlokomedise setjhaba sa rona hore le ha mmuso o na le diphetisetso bo jwalo, ntshetsopele ya naha ke mosebetsi wa setjhaba sohle, ke mosebetsi o kopanelwang ke mmuso, ke ditsi tse ikemetseng esitana le sona setjhaba. Mmuso ona o ikemiseditse, mme re ka lakatsa mme ke a kgothaletsa hore setjhaba sa rona ditsi tse ikemetseng le bohle re keneng ka mafolofolo hore re etse form partnerships morerong wa ntshetsopele ya naha. Re keke ra tseba hore mmuso o sebetse o le mong, o tla sebetsa mmoho le baahi, setjhaba esitana le ditsi tse ikemetseng le bohle. In this commitment, government requires a partnership of all stakeholders, local and international. In the context that I just highlighted. Heavy reliance on circuit transfers, which we project will stabilize at around 8% of GDP, continue to pose a major macro-fiscal vulnerability and risk to our country, especially given South Africa's economic performance and regional and global trade dynamics. Our kgwebo e sa tsamaye hantle lefatsheng ka bophara. Lekeno lena leo le fumanang ho tswa selekaneng sa SARI ho ba di atisitse le kgwebo e ba qholotso ho rona. Mme ke ka hona ke reng re lokela hore jwale re bone mekgwa ya ho ikemela re se re itshetleha haholoholo ka lekeno lena hobane ha re na taolo tabeng tse etsahalang lefatshe ka kgwebo le kgwebisano tse ka etsang hore lekeno lena le tswelle. Honourable President, Right Honourable Speaker, external trade shocks Honourable President, Right Honourable Speaker, external trade shocks, including the new tariff regimes on our apparel exports, combined with global dynamic market weaknesses, threaten domestic revenue and reserve buffers. A minor decline in regional trade growth would necessitate a mid-year fiscal adjustment for us. This is a major risk. Fiscal risks also arise from contingent liabilities associated with state-owned enterprises and public-private partnerships. Many state-owned enterprises continue to operate with significant levels of non-guaranteed debt, estimated at 1.4% of GDP. In addition, some legacy PPP contracts contain termination clauses representing potential exposure of up to 3.8% of GDP. A comprehensive audit of these agreements is underway to avoid risks that could reach the proposed 60% of GDP, of 60% of GDP, debt to GDP ceiling under the fiscal rules framework. The very same trade barriers and protectionist policies in any form undermine investor confidence and long-term training in vulnerable trade-dependent economies. And for us specifically, the impact exerts more pressure in the textile and apparel industry, historically our largest private sector employer and a cornerstone of our export base and foreign exchange aims. What was once our comparative advantage, anchored by preferential access of the largest markets, has now become a structural vulnerability. International buyers are actively de-risking their supply chains, diverting orders away from smaller economies like ours. The result, again, is closures, layoffs, and large-scale unemployment, and increased pressure on household income. This erosion of our industrial base, poses long-term risks, not only to employment, but also to skills retention, foreign exchange aims, and other fundamental factors. Again, the conclusion is that the city can no longer rely on episodic growth. We can no longer rely on preferential access or external financing to sustain jobs and public services. Resilience must now be built deliberately through stronger growth, domestic revenue mobilization, public financial management, or good public financial management, and institutions building capable of executing policy with speed and precision. Fiscal policy then and now remains the ultimate central instrument and anchor for restoring confidence, social protection, and enabling private sector-led growth. This state of affairs has led to one other risk, which is the external financing environment that has tightened significantly. Global development assistance is being reprioritized as advanced economies face rising debt burdens, geopolitical tensions and associated threats, geographical or demographic shifts and pressures, and higher domestic spending needs. For us, this has translated into reduced access to concessional growing assistance. As traditional sources of grant support recede and global development finance becomes more selective, our resilience increasingly depends on how effectively we can anchor growth within our immediate region. The regional economy is no longer a secondary consideration and option. It is now the primary buffer through which the city can and must absorb external shocks, sustain trade, secure revenue, and protect livelihoods. It is against this backdrop, therefore, that regional development, particularly within Southern African region, assume new or renewed strategic importance to us. The situation forces us to forge new strategic alliances as we strengthen existing partnerships. The bloated public sector wage bill, estimated at approximately 70% of GDP, remains amongst the highest in the region and globally, and is fiscally unsustainable. It crowds out spending on the most essential growth-inducing infrastructure such as roads and bridges, health infrastructure, schools, and productive infrastructure. This must be contained as a matter of urgency. Government cannot be the employer of choice or first choice. Neither can it be the employer of last resort. We must do everything to see that the private sector takes its rightful place and plays its role in this country. And to the private sector, government cannot be your only client. Once again, I urge you to de-risk from government. You have to move into productive economic activities and sectors. There's no way around it. It has to happen. Finally, the withdrawal of international health finance has created an estimated annual funding gap of 1.5 billion that we have to respond to. But I'm glad to also report that we are appreciative to the government and people of the United States of America for resuming our resumption of part of funding towards the control of HIV and AIDS and communicable diseases, including tuberculosis, through the U.S. Department of State. And through this, an amount of $218 million will be dispersed over a period of 5 years, starting from April 2026. This is an equivalent of 3.5 billion money. So the budget further introduces measures to internalize these costs through reprivatization, capitalizing on efficiency gains, and sustainable financial mechanisms without compromising fiscal stability. In navigating a more uncertain global environment, government has identified 3 strategic opportunities to strengthen resilience and unlock sustainable growth. First, we will accelerate product and market diversification to reduce concentration risks and expand export and domestic value chains. Secondly, we will forge new partnerships while deepening existing ones to mobilize investment, technology, and access to markets. And thirdly, we will pursue the strategic optimization of all our natural resources, ensuring that they are managed prudently, leveraged for value addition, and translated into lasting economic and social returns for the nation. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, Musonke, this macroeconomic context leads to a clear, again, and unavoidable conclusion that we need a deliberate shift in policy, especially with priorities, towards strengthening our domestic revenue, enforcing discipline and efficient expenditure, and restoring credibility in policy execution. Once again, economic resilience is very important. So it is no longer an option for us to build economic resilience. It is now central for us to build it. This fiscal stance allows government to fund national priorities while maintaining stability, despite the risks that I have just mentioned. As we do so, we must be aware and ready to mitigate implementation risks linked to ambitious capital programs that end up not being implemented. must also be able to budget only for projects that are execution ready. And additionally, the projected increases in interest payments to both residents and non-residents demand careful monitoring. The social fiscal position, as I indicated earlier, has improved in recent years. While this has provided temporary relief, it has also underscored a clear reality. Our public finances remain highly exposed to external and cyclical revenues. Sustainable fiscal management therefore requires discipline in good times, not only adjustment in difficult times. Government's fiscal strategy is anchored on three objectives. One is maintaining macro-fiscal stability, reducing vulnerability to revenue volatility, and creating durable fiscal space for growth-enhancing investment and human development. Within this framework, fiscal policy may be guided by the structural balance rather than temporary windfalls to avoid pro-cyclical spending and protect future values. To strengthen resilience, government will institutionalize mechanisms to save a portion of the windfalls, revenue windfalls, especially from SAPI and from mineral-related revenues, while allowing transparent and measured use during periods of economic stress. This approach will smooth expenditure, protect priority programs, and enhance fiscal credibility, including through the finalization of regulations to establish a stabilization fund. Reducing excessive dependence on SACU remains a number one priority. We will intensify domestic revenue mobilization through strengthened tax administration, improved compliance, and modernized payment systems to reduce leakages from the system. The focus will be on broadening the tax base and improving efficiency rather than increasing the burden on compliant taxpayers or vulnerable households. To this end, the Tax Administration Bill amendments, Income Tax and VAT Administration Bill will be tabled in this year. Non-tax revenues will also receive renewed attention. Fees, charges, penalties, as well as resource-based revenues will be managed with greater transparency and predictability to ensure fair and reliable returns from public assets. In this regard, government is actively engaging with South Africa on the review of the water royalty framework under the Lesotho Highlands Water Arrangement to better reflect the economic value of this strategic natural resource. Evolving cost structures and long-term sustainability in a cooperative and mutually beneficial manner. The sustained decline in rough diamond prices has placed pressure on operating mines, employment and long-term investment, particularly in Lesotho's high-cost, deep-level operations. Mining, however, remains a strategic pillar of our economy. The government response is guided by a clear principle. Fiscal rigidity that accelerates mine closures ultimately destroys jobs, revenue, and national assets. So government is developing an overarching rules-based fiscal stabilization framework for the mining sector prioritizing employment preservation, continuity of operation, and extension of mine life during periods of market stress. On the expenditure side, government's priority is not merely how much we spend, but how well we spend. While protecting essential services in health and education, government will strengthen efficiency, targeting and delivery of social protection programs to ensure that resources reach the most vulnerable households. At the same time, firm control will be exercised over rigid recurrent expenditures, particularly the wage bill, to preserve space for operations, for maintenance, and high-quality capital investment. We continue on our journey to increase capital investments driven by project readiness and execution capacity, with priority given to projects that are fully prepared technically, financially, and institutionally, so that public investments translate into completed infrastructure and assets, as well as tangible economic returns. Borrowing will remain prudent and strategic. Government will prioritize concessional financing for high-impact projects, carefully manage fiscal risks and contingent liabilities, and strengthen oversight of public enterprises. Within this framework, government has created the policy and institutional space for the engineering and potential issuance of diversified financing instruments, including a diaspora bond, longer-dated infrastructure bonds for 7 years and beyond, and the groundwork for a green bond framework to support renewable energy and climate-aligned investments. This fiscal strategy reflects a decisive shift from short-term pressures to long-term resilience, from reliance on volatile revenues to domestic efforts, and from budget expansion to disciplined execution. To this end, government will operate a rules-based fiscal framework anchored on the following quantitative parameters. First, a debt ceiling of 60% of GDP as a hard ceiling. A debt anchor of 50% of GDP, which is a medium-term target. And an external debt limit of 40% of GDP. And a structural deficit target of no more than 3% of GDP, adjusted for certain volatility supported by operational expenditure guidelines. Mr. Speaker, coming now closer to the estimates, government's short-term and medium-term policy framework remains firmly anchored in the Extended National Strategic Development Plan 2, which provides a critical planning tool with the horizon going up to 2027-28, within which government will consolidate ongoing reforms, complete priority interventions, and safeguard development momentum following successive global and domestic shocks. This framework continues to guide national priorities and public investment decisions, as well as the allocation of scarce fiscal resources in a disciplined and strategic manner. In that light, inclusive broad-based, sustainable, and employment-creating economic growth remains the primary and central objective of government. While macroeconomic stability may not be sufficient, it is certainly a necessary condition for growth. We have to turn our fiscal fortunes into sustained, long-term growth. As such, government will continue to implement reforms that guard and maintain stability while expanding productive capacity and accelerating private sector-led growth across agriculture, manufacturing, mining, tourism, services, and other growth-driving sectors. We will continue to strengthen the business environment through targeted regulatory reforms, improved investment facilitation, and enhanced access to finance, particularly for micro, small, and medium enterprises, while promoting export diversification, value addition, and high-impact infrastructure investment. In our pursuit for this goal of government's policy direction is to prioritize infrastructure that enables productivity, that enables trade, private sector participation and job creation. This includes investments in roads and connectivity networks, investments in bridges, investments in aviation infrastructure, investments in renewable energy generation and transmission, investments in water sector, including irrigation schemes, water management facilities, as well as education and health. This investment will unlock domestic and international trade, strengthen tourism, enhance energy security, improve agricultural productivity, and expand the productive sector of our human capital. A coordinated approach supported by improved project preparation and accelerated implementation is essential to maximize economic returns, to ground in private investment, and ensure that infrastructure spending translates into tangible growth. As government builds this new infrastructure, we are equally mindful of the growing threat posed by climate-related disasters to existing assets. Floods, droughts, and extreme weather events are increasingly damaging public infrastructure and imposing recurrent fiscal costs. So accordingly, this budget prioritizes not only creation of new infrastructure, but also reinforcement, rehabilitation, and climate-proofing of vulnerable and aging infrastructure, ensuring durability, resilience, and value for money over the asset life cycle. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, our economy has long been government-led and heavy, and dependent on external revenues. A central policy goal is therefore to rebalance towards private investment and exports. This will entail the following: promoting private sector-led growth and export-oriented investments to create jobs and reduce poverty, to improve the business climate, simplifying regulations, creating a competitive environment, and unlocking access to finance. Thirdly, diversification beyond the apparel, diamonds, and water exports. And lastly, building resilience to external shocks. The second pillar is fiscal consolidation and revenue mobilization. So, fiscal discipline and effective revenue mobilization remain the cornerstone of stability. Sustainable growth cannot be achieved without stability, and stability cannot be secured if the fiscal framework remains vulnerable to external shocks and structural weaknesses. Government will therefore remain firmly committed to ensuring fiscal discipline across the public sector. So in this vein, a strengthened control environment is a must, and to ensure that every unity that is spent delivers measurable economic and social returns for the benefit of pursuit. Accountability systems will continue to be reinforced to minimize waste, theft, inefficiency, and leakage, all forms of leakage. The government will protect and progressively expand capital spending while insisting on timely execution so that public investment delivers growth, delivers assets, and development dividends. At the same time, the current spending will be rationalized and confined to enabling the effective functioning of public institutions without inefficiencies. In addition, to limit our vulnerability in the face of an uncertain global economic environment, we will continue to first build frameworks that enable us to save and invest the windfall revenues wisely. And by this, the creation of a stabilization fund will continue. Secondly, we will improve public financial management and procurement. And in this one, institute e-procurement to limit the resource hemorrhage that we are currently suffering from procurement practices. And thirdly, promote fiscal discipline and better spending. And lastly, to target spending towards high return infrastructure that creates value and stimulus. With regard to revenue mobilization, we seek to maximize domestic revenue collection while remaining cognizant of prevailing global and domestic vulnerabilities. Revenues that are raised will be directed primarily towards service delivery and productive capital investment, ensuring that compliant taxpayers see tangible benefits from their contributions and therefore get encouraged. Efforts to simplify compliance and reduce administrative burdens will continue, supported by investments in digital tax systems, including the expansion of electronic filing and payment platforms, particularly for VAT. Systems to improve the collection of non-tax revenue, including fees, charges, and penalties, will be strengthened through the rollout of cashless payment solutions and enhanced accountability mechanisms. In parallel, government will review selected fees, charges, and penalties to ensure fairness, efficiency, and alignment with service delivery objectives. And as part of our ongoing digital transformation agenda, government has made significant progress in implementing the e-government payments integration project, working initially with one mobile network operator while other financial services providers are at various stages of onboarding and system integration. This initiative is modernizing and streamlining the payment of public services across ministries, reducing reliance on cash at payphones, lowering administrative costs, and minimizing risks associated with holding cash and holding it. It will also improve convenience for citizens by simplifying and standardizing how government services are paid for. In this vein, I'm pleased to report that the development phase has been successfully completed, and the system is now in the final stages of testing, with the public launch planned for April. This reform forms part of a broader effort to modernize public financial management and transform the city's payment landscape for the benefit of all Basotho. So government will continue to nurture strategic partnerships with local partners, bilateral and multilateral institutions, and the broader international community to mobilize transitional financing, technical assistance, and investment in support of this important national priority. Coming to strengthening productive sectors, it is the resolve of governments to harness our natural resources, human capital, skills, innovation, and creativity to unlock the city's comparative advantages and strengthen productive capacity and trade competitiveness. The agricultural sector remains pivotal, yet significantly underexploited, limiting progress towards food security, import substitution, and rural employment. Government views agriculture as a catalyst for industrialization through agro-processing value chains that can generate decent jobs and export earnings. Accordingly, this budget prioritizes investments in skills, in research, and institutional capacity aimed at unlocking the full potential of this strategic sector. Through the strategic utilization of our water resources, government will roll out transformative investments in irrigation infrastructure. Increased agricultural output will be processed domestically to support import substitution and export diversification, strengthening foreign exchange earnings while deepening value chains within the economy and creating jobs. Lesotho welcomes the one-year extension of AGOA, which provides a pivotal and which provides a critical, low time-bound opportunity to stabilize exports, protect jobs, and ecosystem in the manufacturing sector. This extension is being treated not as a cost reform, but as a bridge for decisive action. During this period, government is working with industry and financial institutions to support firm-level restructuring, productivity improvements, and market diversification, while accelerating regional trade integration and reducing over-reliance on a single preferential regime. Instruments such as the Inclusive Growth Facility are being deployed now to provide targeted working capital and machinery finance, enabling exporters to meet orders, retain employment, and improve competitiveness. Our objective is clear: to emerge from this transition with a more resilient, diversified, and competitive productive base. And in this regard, our policies aim to diversify exports and reduce reliance on a single or few markets. To strengthen regional trade and leverage the African Continental Free Trade Agreement while exploring new markets, bilateral or multilateral, as well as opportunities for cooperation for mutual benefit and gain. We also aim to support productive business activities in key sectors such as manufacturing, energy production, agriculture, tourism, and services. Turning now to digital transformation, we live in a digital era, and the city cannot afford to fall behind. Digital transformation is urgent and indispensable for accelerating growth, inclusive and effective participation in the global economy. So government will make sensible investments to accelerate digitization and enable our population to have access to digital infrastructure. Targeted actions will be implemented to expand ICT access and connectivity, improve reliability, and bridge the digital divide. Infrastructure will be extended to underserved areas upgraded and installed, and partnerships with satellite service providers will be deepened to reach communities beyond the limits of terrestrial networks. Affordable public internet access points will be rolled out to enable broader participation, particularly among young people in the digital economy. Within government itself, digital systems will be modernized, cybersecurity strengthened, and electronic platforms expanded to improve service delivery, transparency, and information sharing. Investments in digital skills for public servants will ensure that systems are secure, accessible, and responsive to the needs of citizens. Through these measures, government is broadening digital reach, reducing connectivity gaps, and enabling Lesotho to participate fully in a modern, knowledge-based economy. And for this, we aim to enhance access to digital infrastructure and service. We aim to improve the service, service delivery across government and private sector, reduce the time and cost of transacting, and enhance creativity, innovation, and inclusion. And coming to human capital development, sustained investments in human capital remain fundamental to long-term development. Government will continue to improve education and skills development, expand technical and vocational training, and support entrepreneurship to keep Lesotho with skills aligned to labor market needs. The health system will be strengthened to improve efficiency, quality, and access, including a review of tertiary healthcare delivery. Social protection systems will be modernized to better protect and support vulnerable households, ensuring that growth is inclusive and that no Lesotho is left behind as the economy transforms. In parallel, government is placing renewed emphasis on nutrition as a foundational pillar for human capital development. Preventing stunting, malnutrition, and diet-related health conditions is essential to build healthy bodies, sharp minds, and a productive workforce. So this budget therefore prioritizes daily life and community-based nutrition interventions, recognizing that investments in nutrition yield some of the highest long-term social and economic returns. We will scale up preventive nutrition programs, including maternal and child nutrition initiatives, school-based feeding, and community-level delivery mechanisms such as nutrition clubs. These platforms will be used to promote balanced diets, local food production, and nutrition education, particularly in rural and climate vulnerable communities. By strengthening nutrition outcomes across the life cycle, government is investing not only in better health, but in improved learning outcomes, higher productivity, and a more resilient future for our people. And policy priorities in this area include improving educational outcomes and workforce skills, maintaining social protection and economic inclusion, reducing urban-rural inequality, and supporting vulnerable groups and human capital development enhancement and inclusion. I turn now to governance and institutional strengthening. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, good governance is the foundation for stability and sustainable development. The government is committed to enhance capabilities of oversight institutions and facilitate the completion of constitutional reforms to adopt best practices for public financial management and governance, local governance. Other focal areas include access to justice, crime prevention, and the effective delivery of public services. Effective parliamentary oversight. In particular, preventive oversight requires the right interface between the legislature and the executive through creating an ecosystem that allows regular, effective, and timely reporting. There is room to enhance rules within which public scrutiny happens to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. Furthermore, for Lesotho to position has served as a viable investment destination, strong corporate governance norms and practices are vital to secure long-term capital investment. Therefore, governance instruments such as shareholder agreements should receive special attention and be reviewed where necessary to secure the interests of the government and the people. Leadership and quality technical training for different cadres we are focused to improve policy development and service delivery. Complementing these reforms, targeted leadership and development technical training across all cadres, especially key within private to strengthen policy formulation, institutional performance, and service delivery across the public sector. Furthermore, as Lesotho positions herself as a credible and competitive investment, strong corporate governance standards will remain essential for mobilizing long-term capital. Government will review and strengthen governance instruments, including those that have been in existence for a very long time. Mr. Speaker, public financial management, even across this oversight body, will remain critical. Priority will be given to strengthening fiscal discipline, to improving budget credibility, and ensuring that public resources are managed transparently, efficiently, and sustainably. We will continue to modernize treasury operations through improved cash management, strengthened commitment controls, and enhanced expenditure oversight to prevent the accumulation of arrears and other commitments. This reform will be supported by ongoing upgrading of financial management systems, strengthened internal audit and accountability mechanisms, and a renewed focus on linking budgets to results. Together, these measures will safeguard public finances, protect service delivery, and reinforce confidence in the stewardship of Together, these measures will continue. These measures will safeguard public finances, protect service delivery, and reinforce confidence in the stewardship of national resources. Honorable Speaker, this lays the foundation now for me to go into right on
we reorganize ourselves. We are able to proceed.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I now beg your indulgence that I move now into sector allocations. Honorable President, Honorable Right Honorable Speaker, a total of, as I start with sector allocations, I will start with sectors that promote economic growth and investment promotion, and therefore that also support job creation. A total of 1.8 billion money is allocated to the economic growth and job creation sector to stimulate private sector activity, boost productivity, and expand employment opportunities. In trade and investment, an allocation of 437.4 million has been directed to trade and investment to strengthen economic competitiveness, expand market access, and support enterprise development across various sectors. Resources will support market diversification across various partners, the EU, the UK, USA, European Free Trade Association, African Continental Free Trade Areas, Southern African Customs Union, and Southern African Development Community SADC, to say a few. Spending under this program is structured around three priority areas. One, modern trade facilitation, economic diversification, and investment climate strengthening, aimed at improving efficiency, reducing business costs, and expanding productivity. Under trade facilitation, funding will support the operationalization of the national single window for trade, integrating 10 ministries into a unified digital platform to make it easier for the private sector to register and to receive services without extended periods of time. Border modernization investments at Maseru Reach, at Fixback and Bachasneck will improve logistics efficiency and regional competitiveness. Free business registration and the digital licensing system will lower entry barriers for entrepreneurs. For economic diversification, allocations will support industrial development in Maseru and the Ribe, the Maseru Apparel and Textile Hub, and the establishment of 3 new industrial hubs for cosmetics, essential oils, and spices. Investments in horticulture and poultry, valued at 2.5 billion, will be facilitated to strengthen food security and domestic production. Entrepreneurship support will continue to better the competitiveness and financial inclusion facilities party and the Institute Enterprise Assistance Program (LEAD). To expand trade in services, funding will support implementation of the SADC Protocol on Trade in Services, including skills preparation for Basuto professionals is IT, education, finance, and health. To strengthen the investment climate, allocations will support finalization of the Special Economic Zones Bill, completion of sector strategies for textiles, apparel, and automotive manufacturing, and continued construction of the standards and quality infrastructure building. Development finance instruments, including partial credit guarantees, supply chain finance, quasi-equity instruments, the Inclusive Growth Fund Facility, and the Cooperative Development Bank Development Fund will support Basuto-owned enterprises and community-based economic activity. Coming to agriculture, an allocation of 1.1 billion has been earmarked for agriculture to strengthen food security, raise productivity, and support sustainable farming systems. Expenditure in 2026-27 will prioritize food production, irrigation systems development, livestock protection, and strengthening of key agricultural value chains. To improve crop production, government will support sharecropping blocks through subsidized agricultural machinery and to expand cultivated land and improve efficiency. The Maseru storage and logistics facility will be fully operationalized to strengthen national grain reserves and post-harvest management. To support climate resilient agriculture, government will establish irrigation schemes at a minimum of 8 sites to stabilize production, reduce dependence on rainfall or rain-fed agriculture, and enable year-round farming across priority crop zones. To safeguard livestock, allocations will finance the free national vaccination programs targeting sheep scab and anthrax, strengthen border biosecurity controls, and preparatory works towards establishment of a national animal diagnostic laboratory. In the wool and mohair subsector, funding will support continuation of the merino breeding program and upgrading of the cooking artificial insemination facility, including installation of a liquid nitrogen plant to improve fiber quality, productivity, and rural incomes. In tourism, culture and sports, an allocation of 288.7 million has been provided to the tourism, culture and sports sector to expand tourism offerings, preserve national heritage, and strengthen sports development. In 2026-27, spending will prioritize tourism infrastructure, destination marketing, and heritage protection, including commencement of accommodation facilities in Kabo Ea and Small. Rollout of a national tourism campaign, engagement of tourism ambassadors, and enhanced digital marketing alongside resources for the finalization and enactment of the Tourism Act to modernize the sector's regulatory framework. To support growth in tourism, culture, and sports, government has prioritized high-impact investments in the sector. 150 million has been allocated for sports infrastructure to upgrade key facilities and expand access to quality sports amenities nationwide. In addition, 55 million has been provided for tourism promotion, cultural development, marketing, and tourism asset development, aimed at strengthening destination visibility, preserving heritage, and enhancing the quality and competitiveness of Lesotho's tourism offering. Moving now to the human capital development. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, the human capital development sector receives 8.1 billion money to strengthen education, health, skills development, and social welfare programs, ensuring a capable, healthy, and socially supported population. In education, an allocation of 3.5 billion has been provided to improve learning outcomes, expand access, and advance critical sector reforms. Government will prioritize curriculum reform, strengthening technical and vocational education, and expanding early learning and basic education, supported by investments in infrastructure for classrooms, laboratories, workshops, modern equipment, and teacher training for the new three-tier curriculum. Resources are also allocated to improve governance and quality assurance through strengthened school management, faster infrastructure delivery, expanded digital learning, improved learning materials, and modernized education data systems to ensure a more equitable, resilient, and labor market responsive education system. We plan to roll out services such as access to water, access to electricity, access to connectivity, and health services at all schools. And allocation, I move on now to health services. An allocation of 3.1 billion has been provided to the health sector to strengthen service delivery, improved healthcare infrastructure, and enhance population well-being. In 2026-27, government will intensify reforms anchored on primary health care, focusing on stronger community-based services, focusing on prevention, and a more responsive health system, including improved maternal and child health, expanded immunization and community health services, elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and strengthened environmental health, covering water, sanitation, food safety, and climate health actions. Resources will also modernize the national referral system, strengthen prevention and management of communicable diseases, advance establishment of the Lesotho Medical School through accreditation, infrastructure, and equipment, and reinforce disease surveillance and emergency preparedness, supported by improved health data systems and operationalization of the Public Health Emergency Operations Center. In infrastructure development priorities, an allocation of 6.5 billion has water infrastructure development priorities to accelerate national development, modernize critical public assets, and support economic growth through increased connectivity, service delivery, and resilience. An allocation of 386 million has been provided to the ICT sector to advance digital transformation and expand access to modern technological services. Funding will prioritize expansion of connectivity to underserved areas, upgrading IT infrastructure in public institutions such as schools, such as community halls, such as local government offices, as well as healthcare centers. Partnerships with satellite service providers to reach remote communities and rollout of affordable public internet access points, as well as modernization of government systems, including strengthened cybersecurity management, expanded platforms, and digital skills development for public servants. Coming to energy, an allocation of 1.7 billion has been designated for the energy sector to strengthen energy security, expand access, and support sustainable power generation, renewable power generation. In 2026-27, government will intensify investment in renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure, guided by the National Energy Compact, to accelerate universal access to affordable and reliable energy. Thanks to the World Bank Group, Lesotho is now a member of Mission 300, a program and a compact that aims to provide power to 300 million people in Africa between now and 2030. This initiative is sponsored and supported by the World Bank and the African Development Bank. Resources will, amongst other initiatives, support expansion of generation capacity through additional solar and hydropower projects, upgrading of substations, establishment of strategic fuel reserves, continued grid expansion and modernization, deployment of mini-grids and solar home systems, upgrading of rural networks, and electrification to support industrial and economic development, while mobilizing private sector participation and strengthening financing mechanisms. Complementing these investments, multi-year programs including renewable Lesotho will continue expanding green mini-grids, solar-powered water solutions, improved cook stoves, and off-grid electrification through 2028, reinforcing energy security, energy resilience, and supporting climate resilience and inclusive growth. In the water sector has been allocated 2.4 billion to enhance water security and improve supply systems, as well as strengthening water resource management. Funding will support expansion of integrated catchment management under the River project, supported by European Union. Construction of 17 new rural water systems across all districts. Maintenance of village water schemes and systems, and implementation of climate resilient water and sanitation investments. Under the Lesotho Lowlands Water Development Project, Phase 2 and Phase 3, allocations will support completion and expansion of water distribution networks, transmission pipelines, reservoirs, pumping stations, and construction of 1,027 sanitation facilities, increasing national water and sanitation coverage. Under Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, under roads and buildings, a total of 2.1 billion has been allocated to roads and buildings to strengthen national connectivity and upgrade critical infrastructure. Funding will support construction and rehabilitation of asphalt and gravel roads across districts. Commencement of strategic projects, including the Tabakota Road and the Tirelo Vehicular Bridge, initiation of new road works, feasibility studies, rehabilitation of priority corridors, and procurement for railway rehabilitation. It is worth mentioning, Honorable Speaker, that with regard to unpaved roads, the plan is that unpaved roads will be upgraded in almost all constituencies with the use of available labor in those constituencies and areas where roads will be done. Honorable Speaker, ditsela tse tla etswa tse unpaid citizen di tla etswa go sebediswa matsoho a setjhaba se sebetsang allocation will also support completion of bus terminals, community council offices, police stations, aviation infrastructure upgrades at One International Airport, and 3 more local airstrips, waste management facilities, fire control services infrastructure, maintenance of government buildings and housing, and implementation of community-based climate resilience projects under the local climate adaptive living facility. It is not just completion of those that are currently going on, it is commencement of new terminals, bus terminals in 3 districts, commencement of community council offices and police stations in other several areas. Governance and institutional strengthening. In governance and institutional strengthening, an allocation of 9.7 billion has been designated to enhance public sector efficiency, reinforce accountability systems, and support institutional reforms. Coming to the sub-sector of advancing security, good governance, and economic diplomacy. Economic transformation cannot be sustained without security, good governance, and national resilience. Investments, enterprise, and service delivery depend on a stable environment. Depends on trusted institutions and the capability of those institutions, including the capacity to manage risks, whether fiscal, climate, or security related. The measures I now outline are therefore integral to safeguarding the economic gains and research in this budget. As part of the commitment to governance and institutional strengthening, government will undertake a comprehensive review of allowances for chiefs to ensure that their remuneration is aligned with their expanding responsibilities in community leadership and local affairs.
To partake in the presentation. Strengthening traditional leadership remains a key pillar in enhancing governance, effectiveness, and social cohesion. In the security sector, government will also prioritize the intake of new recruits into the Mounted Police Service to bolster law enforcement capacity, improve public safety, and ensure adequate staffing to meet
high crime areas such as Ipota Koti, Lephoto Matiega, Kobani, Kibeli, Majelile, Yeria, and Roti. This heightened presence has improved public safety significantly. It has reassured communities and it has contributed to a reduction in violent incidences of violent crimes. With enhanced training, upgraded infrastructure, and strengthened personnel development, security challenges will continue to be mitigated. To promote stability and curb the scourge of corruption and corrupt practices, government will reinforce national early warning and intelligence systems and intensify efforts to prevent terrorism, war response, and related activities. Cyber attacks persistently threaten people, companies, institutions, and governments globally. In response, government will strengthen national cybersecurity by protecting public systems, financial platforms, and critical economic infrastructure against cyber attacks, fraud, and data breaches. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, we will strengthen our resilience and assert our economic sovereignty against these threats. Government is pursuing a more vigorous approach to economic diplomacy, transforming foreign policy into a strategic instrument for national economic security. Our missions abroad and our presence there will become frontline agents for investment promotion, for trade facilitation, and for building new strategic partnerships. Honorable Speaker, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, to protect financial sector integrity and comply with standards, we certainly embark on the National Risk Assessment to identify, assess, and understand specific money laundering and terrorism financing risks. Gaps in systems, including those in the registration and monitoring operations of legal persons, virtual assets, and corruption will also be identified. A risk-based approach will be used to develop and implement a program of action to address areas where liabilities are highest, to prevent laundering of money and prioritize resource allocation accordingly. Statistics and planning systems. Strengthening of national statistics systems for planning remain paramount for evidence-based planning and policy making. The population census will be undertaken in April-May this year and will provide valuable information about our population to assess the quality of life, the changes that affect our population, and inform policy making on what needs to be improved and priorities so that we sharpen our policy making and targets. It also comes at an opportune time when the performance review of the NSPP is due, of April to undertake analytical work and possible scenarios that can set the city on a higher economic growth trajectory and position the city on a sustainable long-term development path. As we also exploit the industrial revolution as well as beneficial integration into global markets. On anti-corruption and institutional reforms, the Directorate for Corruption and Economic Offences will strengthen anti-corruption and institutional reform measures in the upcoming financial year with an allocation of 70.8 million. This will include expanding public awareness programs, conducting corruption risk assessments and integrity audits, and enhancing investigative and prosecutorial capacity. The Directorate will enforce asset declaration requirements and lifestyle audits to promote transparency and accountability. A national corruption psychology study will be undertaken to inform targeted interventions and guide policy reform. In addition, technological systems will be upgraded to improve operational efficiency and reduce vulnerabilities to cyber-related threats. On cross-cutting issues, I would like to talk about youth development and empowerment. Youth development and empowerment has been allocated 184.3 million. This government declared youth unemployment a national disaster in mid-2025. It was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was a recognition that we cannot build a stable future whilst our most energetic, our youth, or our most energetic asset, which is our youth, remains on the sidelines. Government continues to intensify its strategic partnership with all stakeholders to join forces to address the unemployment crisis. In collaboration with our development partners, we rolled out the Power Hub initiative that seeks to establish dedicated youth innovation centers in every district, starting with the rear and footing in 2026-27. These hubs will provide market-aligned training in digital coding, agro processing, and high-end textiles linked to the ITC Ethical Fashion Initiative. On the other hand, the National Volunteer Corps, NVC, has been scaled as a front line for bridging the no job without experience gap. For 2026-27, we are increasing the budget for the NVC to allow for an additional 2,500 placements for undergraduate graduates. This initiative also has a host partner incentive where the government subsidizes 50% of the stipend for any private firm that hosts an NVC volunteer for a minimum of 12 months, with a pathway for permanent employment. To ensure immediate relief, the youth apprenticeship program and the public works program that I spoke about are being revised in the state. A mandate has been issued that at least 40% of the labor force on all government-funded infrastructure projects, including the LHW2 secondary road, must be recruited from the local youth population. These participants will not just earn a wage, but will receive trade certifications that enable them to compete for future regional construction projects. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, this financial investment is only half of the equation. To truly address this malady of youth unemployment, we must move from ad hoc programs to permanent, legally binding institutional framework. I'm pleased to announce that for the 2026-27 fiscal year, the government has prioritized the finalization and enactment of the National Youth Development Bill. And this act, once it becomes an act, will legally establish the National Youth Council as the supreme coordinating body for all youth-led organizations and initiatives within the country. The council will not only advocate for youth interests, but will serve as a regulatory body to ensure that youth-focused programs, including the NBC and CAPI, are meeting their performance targets. Honorable President and Right Honorable Speaker, the era of nothing for the youth without the youth starts now. Once enacted, the bill will mandate, among others, the inclusion of youth representatives on boards of public institutions and agencies without compromising the requisite competencies, so that youth-centered issues are dealt with within the institutions as well. We indeed have moved from declaring a disaster to delivering a solution. To our youth, this budget is your invitation to the workshop of national development. The tools are now in your hands, and we need a conversation. The Inclusive Growth Facility is already demonstrating its ability to translate policy intent into tangible economic impact within a single fiscal year. Through our partnership with First National Bank Institute, the government has institutionalized a 100 million guarantee on lending structure under the Inclusive Growth Facility, enabling that bank to deploy its own balance sheet in support of priority productive sectors, particularly textiles and apparel, while prudently managing risks. On the strength of this structure, tailored financial products were developed and taken to market within the same financial year. And as a result, an active financing pipeline now exceeds 200 million dollars. In assessed demand, spending from working capital, machinery acquisition, logistics expansion, and factory upgrades. This pipeline is already under credit assessment and early deployment, and has the potential to stabilize existing employment and unlock job creation opportunities as production scales. Honorable President, alongside this, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, alongside this initiative, government also allocated through the Inclusive Growth Facility 300 million to Post Bank as a disbursement intermediary, focused predominantly on small and emerging enterprises across a broader range of productive sectors, where a strong pipeline of SME financing is already under consideration. Over the medium term expenditure framework, government will scale this model by extending the inclusive growth facility risk-sharing arrangements to additional commercial banks and development finance institutions, broadening sectoral coverage and deepening access to finance while growing in private capital in support of inclusive growth. I now move to climate resilience and sustainability. Climate adaptation and green development remain central to strengthening national resilience and ensuring sustainable development across all sectors. Last year, Lesotho hosted the 2025 International Food and Textile Organization Wool Roundtable, reaffirming our commitment to sustainable rangeland management. Through this work, 2,892 hectares were restored to support rural livelihoods. Despite ongoing climate-driven land degradation, we rehabilitated 60,000 hectares and continue expanding forest cover through the revived Green Recovery Initiative. To reduce urban pollution, government introduced the plastic levy in December 2024. Revenue from this levy will, amongst other interventions, finance the construction of buyback centers in Maseru and Maputo, and later on in other districts as well, to promote recycling, to create income opportunities, and support a cleaner and greener Lesotho. I move now to disaster risk financing. Honorable President, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Speaker. In 2026-27, the government will strengthen disaster risk management by accelerating the implementation of the disaster risk reduction policy and completing the national resilience strategic framework to guide coordinated resilience actions across all sectors. Disaster risk management working groups will be revived at all levels to improve coordination and preparedness. The National Early Warning Strategy will be updated to strengthen hazard forecasting and community alert systems, alongside the undertaking of comprehensive hazard mapping and vulnerability assessments to inform safer development planning and give support to households at risk. In parallel, financial preparedness will be reinforced through continued participation in the Africa Risk Capacity Mechanism. In conclusion, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, this budget is grounded in a simple but profound conviction. The future prosperity of our nation depends on our ability to transform our economic structure and fortunes and unlock the productive potential of our people. From the global shocks we face, through the fiscal choices we make, to the reforms we implement, and the investments we prioritize, this budget has followed a single simple logic. Resilience built through discipline. Inclusion driven by opportunity and growth enabled by digital as well as institutional transformation and human capital development. These are not slogans. They are the principles that guide the 2026-27 budget estimates, and that guides the pathways to a stronger, more self-reliant and sustainable Lesotho. We have chosen a path that prioritizes resilience over vulnerability, productivity over dependence, and opportunity over stagnation. We have chosen to place enterprise at the center of growth, to invest in infrastructure that expands possibilities, and to strengthen institutions that support long-term development. For our Kabo Ea Lichelete. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, let me reaffirm with absolute clarity the central message of this budget. This is not a budget of presidency. It is a budget that requires action. It is a budget of action. It is built to stabilize our economy, to reform our institutions and unlock inclusive growth for every nation. It is a call to strengthen national resilience, modernize our systems, and confront our challenges with the courage and confidence they demand. The journey ahead will not be without difficulty, not by enemies. Structural transformation requires discipline. It requires persistence. It requires for us to work as a collective. It demands that we manage our public finances responsibly. It demands that we implement reforms consistently and maintain the confidence of citizens and investors alike. This is the moment for Lesotho to choose boldness over comfort, discipline over complacency, and progress over stagnation. The direction we take from here will define the legacy of this parliament and the future of our nation. We cannot allow another generation of Lesotho to wait for the economic potential of this nation to be fully realized. We take our for the public service remuneration, it is proposed that the 2026-27 salaries and wages might be adjusted by 2% across the board. The tax credits and thresholds will be adjusted accordingly to partially offset the effects of inflation, protect lower and middle income earners from bracket creep, and sustain fairness with the tax system while preserving revenue stability. In addition, the transfers to our elderly will be increased from 950 maluti by 50 maluti to 1,000. Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, honorable members, it is with deep humility that I thank this honorable House for the time and attention granted to present and listen to this budget statement. But humility must walk hand in hand with determination. The decisions we take today in this House must reflect the urgency of the moment and the aspirations of the Basutu people who trust us and who have entrusted us with their lives, and so doing with their future and the future of their offspring. I take this opportunity, Honorable President, Right Honorable Speaker, members, to extend my sincere gratitude to the Right Honorable Prime Minister, to yourself for listening to me, to the Right Honorable Prime Minister for his steadfast leadership, and to my colleagues in Cabinet for their partnership and collective resolve. I also thank all ministries, staff in all ministries, agencies, and departments whose hard work and technical expertise shaped the foundations of this budget. To the dedicated staff of the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning and its agencies, your discipline, your analytical rigor, and the sacrifices you make daily and that you've made for us to be able to deliver this budget will not go unnoticed. And looking forward, I look for your steadfastness and the same discipline and vigor in aiding government and all its agencies to implement it. Here level, my appreciation also extends to our development partners, to our civil society, the private sector, the traditional leaders, to every who contributed to the shaping and molding of this statement. And I look forward to their contributions to implementing this statement and this policy statement and its estimates for our national progress. Something Baba Mugi Yalwa. Photo
tseba hore ha o etsa le mong o entse le basebetsi mmoho le hore le basebetsi mmoho ba hlanka ba mmuso makaleng a mangata jwale ka ha sa botsetsa mme re a leboha ka nnete go sebeditse hantle mme ha ke tjho jwale ke kopa ho boele ke lebohe le lona ditho tse kgabane ka mamello ya lona e kgethehileng hore a ntshekehele mosebetsi ona wa o entseng wa setjhaba mme le mo file tsebe le mo mameletse ho fihlela ha jwale ke boele ke lebohe Basotho ho se mo ba teng ba bile le mamello ya hore ba dule di-radio tsa bona ba dule di-television tsa bona ho mamela public speech ke mosebetsi wa rona bohle ho bona hore ha ena etswa pele ke mosebetsi wa rona bohle jwale ha sa re tshekehetse this policy statement hore re ke re etse re hlahlobe hantle re kentshe tsheya mme re thuse hore yo sebetsa setjhabeng e tswele Basotho molemo ditho tse kgabane by so saying ke kopa hore this policy statement e fetele to the relevant portfolio committee. Thank you.
So the statement shall stand referred to the relevant portfolio committees according to the standing orders. George Arani, Korean guys with a land building. And one I got a pretty good idea. Otherwise, we will come to the end of today's business. This joint sitting is adjourned.